Hey, capital raisers, Brad Blazar here again with another how-to video on how to attract, raise, closed capital so that you can build, buy, scale your businesses, or as we like to say, just get a seat at the bigger kids table and be doing something much bigger in life. Today, we're going to talk about one of the key fundamental building blocks in raising capital. So very important because what it will help you do is avoid one of the major mistakes we always see with new capital raisers in people that don't have systems and structure. See, one of the biggest challenges people make when they're learning how to raise capital is they have a project, they have a fund, or they have a big idea, and they start talking about it way too prematurely in building the relationship. I like to call it premature presentation. But you see, the other person, out of respect for you, is going to say something very similar to this. Yeah, it sounds like a very interesting opportunity. Why don't you send me some information so I can take a closer look at it? And so you send them everything. And then, of course, they don't invest. Or worse yet, they ghost you. But they give you every reason not to move forward. What's really happened and what's really subconsciously taking place in their mind is they're saying, hey, we just met. I don't know you well enough to really move forward in this process. And so today, what I'm going to share with you is a proven strategy. We actually have a workbook and a PDF in our community right here that if you'd like to get access, you can click the link below and have a free clarity call with one of my coaches. But we call this the 4-step blueprint. And what I've done is I've taken all my knowledge and I've codified it. And I've created key concepts, key building blocks that as you learn them and apply them to your capital raising outreach, will bring certainty and get people to be voting with their checkbooks. You see, things like the 4-step blueprint, which is just one of the major building blocks, or the trust sequence, another one of my concepts, the validation phrase, marketing to the one to get to the masses. These are all of the tools and the resources that we bring to the people that we work with that are trying to raise capital so that they can, number one, do a much better job, but number two, have a structure and a system to control the outcome. So let's go ahead and get started today in this how-to and talk about the 4-step blueprint. In the 4-step blueprint, I want you to think about this not as a script. It's really a blueprint or a framework to constantly be reminding you that working with investors is simply moving people forward from one event to another until a logical outcome. I heard a phrase by Grant Cardone about 2 years ago when he was speaking at an event here in Houston. And I really grasped that because it makes so much sense. And it actually is so true. Also, Jordan Belfort, who's become a great friend and a sales trainer, talks about his straight line method, a very similar process to this. But if you think about this concept that Grant says, money follows motion, it is so very true in all respects. You see, with the 4-step blueprint, the very first step is what I call outreach. There's going to be a call, there's going to be a meeting, there's going to be some type of outreach to that potential investor. And all you're trying to do is just build a relationship by asking questions and being a great listener. The best salespeople in the world listen more than they speak. And that's exactly what you want to be doing here. Because you want to uncover the temptation. We talk about that in the trust sequence, so that when you're pitching the investment opportunity, you can match the benefits that the investment offers to that specific person's need or the temptation. Maybe that investor needs their money to grow so they can put their kids through school in a couple of years. Maybe a very affluent doctor that makes a lot of income tells you that one of his biggest challenges is taxes. And so if your investment offers any tax relief, you want to discuss that. But step number one, again, is the outreach. It's really building the relationship and disarming the investor by letting them know very early in the conversation that you have no opportunity or no investments that you can openly discuss. It's really to generate interest in you, your business, and more importantly, what it is you do. Now, at the end of my first meetup or my first call, I usually send some preliminary information. I certainly do not give them my pitch deck at this point, certainly do not give them access to my offering memorandum, but I might follow up with a link to my website, maybe an interview if I've been on a couple of podcasts, maybe a one-pager. We call that an investment teaser that just summarizes what we do, and I'd probably stamp it or put some type of watermark that just says draft or, copy or whatever. But I want them to know that right now, we're not talking about investment. Now I go to my CRM system. CRMs are very important in capital raising because it prevents the investors from falling through the cracks. The worst thing you can do is be talking to people without a CRM and a system, because you're going to feel like a hamster on a treadmill. I call that randomness in motion, and it's the easiest way to get frustrated because you're not following up with people. So I go to my CRM after my first interaction and I put notes. And I schedule a reminder so that in about 7 to 10 days, that person is showing up on my calendar, and it reminds me now to move them forward in the process. So let's talk about now step number 2. Step number 2 is really follow up. I want to make sure the person got the information I sent them. I want to deepen the relationship by asking even more questions and really getting to know that person much better. It's really another touch. And many times between the first and the second interaction, I might send an email or a text. We call this a non-linear follow-up. One of the things I want you to think about in your sales is what I call linear and non-linear follow-up. You see, a linear is we're talking or we're meeting in person. Think about it like a boxer, right? You got your knockout punch, that's the linear, and then you have the non-linear, which is kind of like your jab. And so how do you stay relevant in the mind of a potential investor when you're not in front of them? It's through an email, or maybe it's through a text, and you're adding value. So as an example, I might see an article and I send it to the potential investor and say, hey, I ran across this article the other day. It made me think of you, or it made me think of the conversation we had, and I thought that you'd find it of interest. You're trying to give yourself opportunities to bring things up in your discussion. Now, at the end of the second call or the second meetup, there is a very important thing that takes place. We talk about this also in the trust sequence. This is what we call the validation phrase. The validation phrase is so important because what it does is it confirms that that investor trusts you enough to move forward in the process to the very next step. And so let me give you just quickly the validation phrase and how I use it and how you can incorporate it into your capital raising strategy as well. Hey, Mr. Jones, I really have enjoyed getting to visit with you the last couple of times we've chatted, but as I've explained, right now I just don't have an opportunity that I can openly share and discuss with you. But here's what I'd love to do. I keep a list of people on my desk that have expressed interest in us and the opportunities and, of course, our company. And what I'd love to do is just add you to that list of people so I can get back in touch with you at some point in the future when I have something I think you can get really excited about. Does that logically make sense to you today? When they say yes, please do that. What they're doing at a very subconscious level is they're saying, I'm ready to move forward to the next step in this relationship. Call me when you have an opportunity. Call me when you have something that I can perhaps take a look at. And so you leave the second call, you thank them for your time, and again now you go to your CRM, you put notes in there, and you create a reminder to call that person back, again, in about 7 to 10 days. Call number 3. This is it. This is where you're pitching your big opportunity, your big idea, your fund, your strategy, whatever it is. So now in call number 3, you have a reason to call the person back. It's because they asked you to. You see the beauty in this? You're not calling to pursue people or to chase people, or you're not coming across from a place of desperation. I'm calling you because you asked me to. And so now when the person picks up, I say, hey, it's Brad Blazar here. And I spend a couple minutes, warming them up, talking about things. What have you been doing lately? And then I finally get to the reason of the call. The reason I'm calling is you asked me to put you on my list. And I'm just going down my list of people here today. And just so happens we have a small opening, or, maybe we have an allocation, or we're getting to the tail end of our close. I always come up with a reason. And if you have a couple minutes, I'd love to tell you what we're working on and see if it's something you'd like to take a closer look at. This is where we're pitching, folks. It's typically on our third meetup or in our third interaction. And so now we go through our presentation at a very high level. You want to spend no more than about 15 to 20 minutes. Brevity is your friend when you pitch, so keep it brief. And now this is where we share everything. The pitch deck, the offering memorandum, or maybe we give them access to our deal room. And then we go into our CRM, put our notes, and we call them about 7 to 10 days later to go through everything, to answer questions, and hopefully invite them to partner with us and become a new investor. When you're closing on call number 4 in the 4-step blueprint, you want to use closing language. I always like to give people options. And so most opportunities have minimum investments, or they have units, or they have shares. Maybe it's priced at $50,000, maybe it's priced at $100,000. But I don't like to give people an easy way to say no. I like to open their mind. Very similar to how I ask people for referrals. When I ask for referrals, I don't say, do you know anybody that might also like to invest? Because they can easily say, no, right now I just can't think of anybody. I use opening language. Who are you connected with that I might also be talking to? So when I close, I like to give them options, and usually they will default to one of the 3. So what I might do as I'm asking them to partner with me is say, now that you know what we're doing and I've answered most of your questions, let's talk about the investment. The investment itself is priced at $50,000 per unit. And so do you see yourself comfortable with 1 unit? Or would you prefer to perhaps do 2 or 3? Of course, the other option is you could choose to do absolutely nothing and not invest. And that would be fine with me too. And then I just shut up. I don't say another word. By giving them the ability to say no, they usually don't choose that option. And they might pause, and they might think, and they might come back to you with a question. Brad, if I did 2 units today, share with me again what that actually represents. And so when I answer that question, I follow that up with another one. Is 2 units something that you're comfortable with? And if they say yes, I go straight to the onboarding process. We get out the subscription paperwork. If I'm talking to them on a telephone or over a Zoom, I instruct them to get the paperwork so that we can fill that out together. I show them how to make out their check. And so then I close them on the investment itself. And then, of course, I spend about another 5 to 7 minutes in what I call the cool down. We don't want to just grab their money and run. We want to build the expectations of what's going to come. So I talk about things like the quarterly newsletter, the end of the year reporting. I give them access to me through phone numbers and emails to our team. I want to make them feel comfortable and welcome in the decision they've just made to be one of our investment partners. And so then we close the call. That's how you work the 4-step blueprint. Brings certainty to you getting more investors, helps you solve one of the biggest problems that we see newbies make, premature presentation, by following a proven system. And so if you like this how-to and you like some of the others, become a subscriber. Or more importantly, click the link below and book yourself a clarity call with one of my team members to learn about all the tools and all the resources we have for you so that you can do a much better job in your outreach, in your conversations, and most importantly, in your raising of capital. It's Brad Blazar saying thank you so much for joining me again for one of our how-to sessions. And I hope to see you at one of our masterminds, or better yet, at one of our live events in the near future. And I hope this helps.